Hello everybody and welcome to the second in our 4-day Rising Up webinar series. Today we're going to be speaking about the apartment of the future. It's a really interesting subject and we've got a great panel. But before we get stuck into the nitty-gritty, I'm just going to show a short video about our sponsors, AltoVita. So thanks to AltoVita for sponsoring. If you'd like to find out more, you can see contact details and their web address in the chat. So today's webinar will last an hour. If you're not one of our panelists, if you could keep yourself muted, that would be fantastic. We're going to have around a 50-minute discussion with our panel. If you have any questions, please do submit them using the chat or the Q&A function. We're keen to make the session as interactive as we can. Everybody who registered will receive a recording of the session via email in the next day or two. And there'll be a couple of polls which will be appearing in the chat throughout the session. So it'll be, and we'll announce the results of those at the end. So if you could fill those out during the session, that would be fantastic. So a few context points just to give the conversation today some background. So the APAC region continues to urbanize at a fast pace and has 16 of the world's 28 megacities and is home to 60% of the world's population. In order to cope with the different ways people are working now, hospitality and real estate companies are adapting their offer. One example here is Ascot's Work in Residence initiative, where its designers are reconfiguring and customizing apartments to provide workspace as well as living space. And we'll move on to that trend in the discussion. Architecture firm HKS is blending technology and structure of the office environment into apartments without increasing square footage. Its designs include a height adjustable workspace that can be used by an adult working, a child playing, or a teenager doing homework. French-Moroccan architectural design practice studio Belém has taken the concept of flexible spaces further with sliding panels instead of walls and integrated furniture systems to make living as fluid as possible. And these are other topics that we'll come on to during the chat today. Developers, sorry, if you go back, Justin, please. Developers and operators are partners with electronics manufacturers and tech companies to create smart apartments with Internet of Things enabled appliances. And prefab construction is becoming more and more prevalent. Singapore has actually mandated elements of prefab construction for all projects on government land. In China, 30% of new buildings are now prefab structures. And one of the reasons behind this is to cut down on the energy and the carbon emissions used to build and run buildings. The World Green Building Council has launched its 2021 Asia Pacific Net Zero program, which focuses on supporting actions to reduce carbon across the whole life cycle of buildings. And it's partnered with some major companies in the region to support that, including power companies and building products manufacturers. And here just a few examples visually of some of the things that we're going to be discussing in the session today. So my name's George Sell. I'm Editor-in-Chief at International Hospitality Media. We're a B2B publisher for the hospitality industry and an event organizer. And joining me today is a fantastic panel of speakers, and I'm going to ask them all to introduce themselves. And I'll go from left to right on the slide. So Dean, if you could kick off, please.
Great, George. Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody. I'm Dean Schreiber. I am the CEO of Oakwood. We're a global service department and hotel operating company, originally headquartered out of the US, but acquired 3 years ago by Mapletree in Singapore, and now our headquarters are in Singapore. In Asia, we operate 46 properties at the moment, a global portfolio of 80. Currently on the call from Los Angeles. It's a little early in the morning here, but glad to be with you today. And thanks for having me, George.
Thanks, Dean, and we appreciate the unsociable hours. We're very glad to welcome you on the session today. Caroline, welcome to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, George, for having me today. My name is Caroline Chou, and I'm the design director of Openuu, and I help hotel general managers and co-living space owners on their guest room and public space design. And on the complementary side, we also work with homeowners on their home renovation. So we've been seeing a lot more home renovation trends recently. So I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you, Caroline. Marc, over to you.
Yes, George, thank you for inviting me, and very nice to be on this panel. I'm very happy to be once on a panel again with Dean, because we've sat on a few in the past. And my position is here in Hong Kong. I'm the COO of Ovolo Hotels. We have properties, 8 of them in Australia, 4 in Hong Kong, and 1 in Bali. So 12 hotels overall. You know, we're a very focused, young, hip and happening company. We switched to hotels 10 years ago, actually started out as service departments. Plus my former background running London hospitality as CEO was service department. So I know a bit about apartments, and I've done 3 quarantines, and you know, you get a preference to stay in apartments rather than hotel rooms. Thank you.
Thanks, Marc. Thanks. Joshua, welcome to you.
Thanks, George. Glad to be here, and great to have all these great co-panelists with me. So I'm Joshua Moorrees. I'm based in Finland, EU. I'm the CEO of Tablebed, and we help our clients to have or make more money when hosting. Basically, serviced apartments and hotels are our main target market, and our awarded and patented multifunctional furniture Tablebed turns from a table to bed in 10 seconds. So that's basically the core of our company, and then great to be part of this great panel. Thanks for having me here, George.
Thanks, Joshua. And last but not least, Paul, welcome to you.
Thank you, George, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to join such a distinguished panel of panelists today. So I'm Paul Gannicott. I lead the technical services team at Onyx Hospitality. We're a hotel and service department management company based in Bangkok. We're also owners and operators of around a dozen hotels, mostly in Thailand. We currently manage a property portfolio of around 50 hotels and service departments in 8 countries around the region. We have a pipeline of around 20 hotel and service department projects that we're looking to open in the next couple of years in a couple of new markets, including Japan. So while the majority of our portfolio is managed hotels, about a quarter is service departments led by our Sharma service department brand. This is predominantly 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartment properties, mostly for long stay guests. But a couple of years ago, we felt there was a gap in the market for a shorter stay studio-based product based around flexible layouts and very efficient footprints. And we launched our Sharma Hub brand. So this is something that's, I think, found a bit of a mark in the market, getting a bit of traction. We've opened one in China earlier this year. We have a couple more due to open in the next year or 2. So I'm delighted to be able to join the conversation today on such an interesting topic. And I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so let's kick off by talking about what people are actually doing in apartments now and how they're using them, because since the pandemic, people are spending a lot more time in their apartments, whether it's whether they're on on a project for work, or whether it's their own home. So I'm quite interested in this concept of having different separate zones within the apartment, so a living zone, a working zone, and so on. I'd start by asking the panelists if this is something they're seeing coming through in the designs of their own apartments. Dean, would you like to kick us off with that one, as you're kind of living this at the moment?
I am indeed. Look, I think it's funny, COVID, the pandemic has really kind of re-emphasized what a lot of us were doing, I guess, already, and that was creating zones and designing a room product around what customers were kind of gravitating towards. And I think that's why serviced apartments have moved from being an alternative form of accommodation to a mainstream form of accommodation now, because we have a little bit more space. We have zones that people can use. Even again, I said, let's take COVID aside. People were looking for that mix of leisure space, working space, being able to travel with the family and have the kids in the room, not down the corridor or in the connecting room. So I think we were already designing that kind of concept, George, around different zones and the desk becoming more of a feature in the room. COVID's just accelerated that we've been doing that and sort of brought it to the forefront of what the consumer sees. But yeah, I think certainly something we will continue with moving forward. And again, COVID has seen us have even more need for those spaces now.
Paul, does that echo what you're seeing with your properties?
I think the pandemic has brought that topic into particular focus. I think it's been bubbling around for a long time now. If you look back perhaps 10 years ago, with the proliferation of these sort of lifestyle-led mid-scale, upper mid-scale hotel brands like Yotel, Moxie, Citizen M, etc., I think they sort of set a path, at least in the hotel sector, for how a developer, an owner, an operator might approach the use of space. And in that approach, of course, the approach was to take a lot of the living spaces, the social spaces, out of the room and put them in a shared communal space, usually downstairs, based around a bar or an F&B outlet, which meant that, at least in that model, the rooms become simply a place to rest and wash, maybe do a bit of work. Everything else happens outside the room. Now, apartments, of course, the expectation by residents, by guests, is that the apartment will be a lot more self-contained. You need to maintain the ability to undertake a lot of different activities within a same space, particularly in a very small studio apartment. You need to find ways to give people some privacy and a bit of space, and allowing them to do a whole range of different activities. I think about Zoku a few years ago when they launched their first property in Amsterdam, I think it was. They took a very architectural approach. They used a very lofty sort of internal space to introduce a mezzanine space, to put the bed up there, to improve that separation of sleep function from social and dining and relaxing. But I think whether it's Zoku or the hotel brands I mentioned, they take a very architectural, a very programmed approach. It's a particular solution. I think when it comes to apartment design, it demands a lot more flexibility in how you tackle that problem. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's not necessarily a brand-led solution. That was the challenge we set ourselves when we launched our Sharma Hub brand that I mentioned briefly in my introduction. A couple of years ago, we thought there was a gap in the market for a very small studio apartment style of serviced apartments, something that had all of the functionality of a serviced apartment. You could work, sleep, bathe, prepare a meal, dine, etc. in there, but to do it in a way that had a very flexible tolerance for the activities people did within them. So the model we adapted there incorporated all sorts of folding furniture. It had a sliding wardrobe that could be moved forward and back, that created a separation between a sleep zone and a work zone, for example. It had we decided that the dining space was perhaps the least used in a studio apartment, particularly for short stay, you're more likely to use an apartment for working or for relaxing and sleeping. So for that reason, we came up with a solution that relied on a folding dining table that folded down from the wall. Folding chairs came out. You could set it up in a space, but when you did need it, which was probably most of the time, it could easily be packed away. So this idea of trying to find inventive uses through flexible furniture and perhaps a partition or a screen that can help subdivide a space when you want a bit of privacy from someone that you might be sharing the space with. That was really the challenge we set ourselves in the Sharma Hub product.
Mm-hmm. And aside from the hub pool, in the main Sharma, sort of more traditional service departments, has the design of those evolved to kind of feature zoning?
I think one of the things we've been exploring more recently is not so much in the apartments, George, because the apartments with our Sharmas, again, they are long stay guest focused. We tend to get a lot of couples or families staying in them, particularly in the larger units. The focus in the last year or two has been developing those shared spaces, developing a sense of community, doing more with our lobby space, doing more with the spaces that either don't generate revenue or would otherwise be fairly dead real estate spaces. They only have a single purpose, for example, a reception and a lobby lounge. You walk through it every day on the way to the lift, of course, but other than a check-in or a check-out, it probably doesn't get much use. So yeah. I think a lot of our focus has been on where we can find opportunities to maximize the usability and also the revenue generating capability of spaces that would otherwise go to waste.
Yeah, yeah, great stuff. Well, we'll move on to the design of communal spaces and what could be done with them later, actually, because I think that is an interesting point. Caroline, what you said you're working on a lot of residential projects. Are you seeing this trend of zoning and separate uses happening in those, and is there any crossover between what you're seeing there and in the hospitality space?
I do see a lot of trends emerging on flexibility on multi-uses, but more in the sense, like, for example, like residential clients, they may have like a slightly larger walk-in closet, but then they kind of use that. They put a desk in there so it becomes like a dual use. So like, you know, it's a storage and they can enclose that space for conference calls just because, you know, everybody's working from home and, you know, how many Zoom calls you have every week, you know? So there definitely is a trend of like trying to use it for more than one purpose, but it could be separated and enclosed if you need some more privacy, as Paul was mentioning. So we do see that. And I think previously we started out as doing like office design and, you know, hotel design. And a lot of the space, the clients always want like multi-purpose use. So it could be like, for example, like hot desk. So it's very similar to co-working spaces, or like, you know, the lobby lounge could be, you know, for people, you know, lobby lounge coffee shop. So it's like, we're seeing a lot more trends of like having it being very, very flexible and targeting different kind of customers and, you know, users.
Thanks, Caroline. And Joshua, in terms of the multi-use furniture and space-saving devices, I mean, the name of your product is fairly self-explanatory. It does what it says on the tin, but tell us a bit about what else is out there and what developers and operators can do to maximize space by clever use of furniture.
Yeah, so that's a good question, George, and I think that the multifunctional use aspect of buildings and serviced apartments or residential apartments are a huge trend, like Paul and Caroline brought up. And then just one case study, we have a client that built a new kind of a accommodation business kind of. They have used the phase or the space like that they will have on the daytime. It serves as a co-working space slash office space, and then on the nighttime it turns into a serviced apartment. So basically, when they build it up, the whole project individually, it would have been 40 million and 50 million, so totally 90 million. But when they combined these two spaces with multifunctional furniture, some of ours, some of our competitors, they could reduce the cost around to 50 million. So there was already like 40 million in savings in the building costs. So that's one side of the equation. And then, of course, as pandemic has told us, it's quite dangerous to have only one use for the space at hand. So basically, all the hotels or serviced apartments are now serving more like remote work from home spaces here, at least here in Europe, than as an accommodation business. So you have to have space that can be turned to a different function or have a function for 24/7 use case. That's my taking from my point of view.
Thanks, Joshua. I'm quite interested in unit size and the direction of travel there, because I get the impression that perhaps there's a divergence and that maybe the top end and the longer stay end of the market, perhaps units are getting bigger, and for everyone else there's more of the kind of apart hotel, micro apartment trend coming in with more communal spaces. Marc, what's your experience over the years in terms of serviced apartment unit size?
Well, okay, I have one comment to make before that. Serviced apartments, another name is also serviced residences, right? So I think the residential feel is very important to guests, you know, be it nowadays actually hotel guest or serviced apartment guest. And that's what I think more and more companies have been trying to infiltrate as a DNA into their look and feel, because you want to feel comfortable, and it starts by walking into the place, but also by where you're actually going to live for, be it short stay or long stay. Now, to come back to your question, like Paul, at the time, I think there was and I think Oakwood did it as well in Singapore originally. So did we at the time. There was a trend for more of road warriors, shorter stays, which obviously require smaller apartments, less expensive apartments, and very smart space division, etc. So I think, you know, it depends where you lie in the market and who you're catering to. But of course, bigger spaces in where you can afford it is always good. If I compare again from hotels to serviced apartments, I remember preaching to my guys in hotels at the time, why do we need a desk in the bedroom? Who has a desk in the bedroom? You know, we want to be more residential. Let's have a table or a counter, because everybody has tablets. They have their devices. Nobody literally sits at the desk anymore. But obviously, in an apartment, you can be more flexible. You have more space. You can build around it, and you can, have that counter. But nothing stops you in a hotel room to do similar ideas, right? So I think it's the residential look and feel that counts, which of course in a bigger apartment is more evident. And if you can, especially now, we noticed during COVID, if you have a balcony, that is incredible. I did one quarantine in Sydney and we had 3 balconies. You know, it's fantastic because it gives you a real, sense of freedom while you're locked up, or how should I say?
Thanks, Marc. Dean, at Oakwood, you've got hotels, you've got different levels of apartments. You've got the Premier brand, you've got the Studios brand. Is the square footage of the apartment one of the differentiators between the different offerings?
Look, again, I think it's very geographic specific. How big you can go with a unit, how small you can go with a unit. I mean, Marc's absolutely right there. The upper end there, the bigger the apartment, if you've got a market that is demanding that, I don't think that's ever going to change. And yet at the other end of the spectrum, we're all trying to find the perfect sized room and what we can do, and you know, and that's driven really by owners and developers and their appetite and what they want to do with their properties. But yeah, we obviously our 5, now we have 6 sub brands, and each of those is kind of around a size, more about the number of apartments rather than the actual square footage of the apartment. Our Oakwood residence property as Marc said, it's it's a resident. It's also Oakwood. It's also serviced residences. That tends to be 2-3 bedroom apartments, whereas our studios are what they are. The studios in our Premier is what it is. It's a Premier product. So there is differentiation in the brands. But as where the market's going, I think there's a market, there's a demand for small rooms, mid-sized rooms, big rooms, and I don't think that's going to change. The big rooms will get bigger, the small rooms will get smaller.
Mm. Sticking with you, Dean, let's move on to the communal spaces. Obviously, if you're staying in a relatively small studio, then you're probably going to expect more in terms of communal space and more provision and more activities there. So how does the communal offering differ at your properties, and how is it changing? What do people expect these days?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I was talking about COVID earlier, and it's very few conversations you have these days where COVID's not factored in. I think the communal spaces at the moment are kind of, they're obsolete in the sense that you're talking about social distancing, and those spaces have kind of been. I'm glad we did invest in our design strategy into those communal spaces as probably where the market was going. I think there's certainly having communal spaces being an extension of your bedroom or your living room, your living space, is certainly valuable. We're not doing a lot with communal spaces at the moment. We think that all of our rooms are still the self-containment of the rooms is really important. As long as communal space is probably important when the room is so small that you're feeling claustrophobic. So we're not doing a lot in that space at the moment, George. Thanks,
Dean. Paul, you mentioned that you are thinking quite a lot about communal spaces and how you can adapt them. So what exactly are you introducing, and what do you think the customer wants?
I think in our service department pipeline, we're taking a lot of cues from what's been happening in the hotel sector over the past few years. If you take the hotel lobby space, for example, George, for many years, forever really, it's been a one space, one purpose model. Increasingly, that's becoming a one space, multi-purpose type of use. And I think the same can apply in the service department model. Dean made the point that at the moment we're in a very unusual situation with social distancing and so on. But I think the challenge and the next few years means designing a space that goes from one purpose to multiple purposes to allow people to share activities together, but also to use that cliche, to allow people to be alone together. So that rather than go downstairs to a Starbucks and work, you might come downstairs to a lobby or a cafe or something within the same apartment building. You're still part of a community. You still have your own space. I think the challenge, it's a big architectural challenge. I don't think we know yet how that's going to resolve itself in terms of defining spaces for people and what people's level of comfort will be in terms of sharing spaces with groups of people again. So certainly there's a very high level, I think, of fluidity or adaptability that common spaces need to account for going forward. And I think the other, to Marc's point earlier, the difference between an apartment block and a service department is in you're receiving service, and particularly if it's a branded or operated apartment, you're also receiving services or amenities or a sense of community that's delivered in a very systematic or coordinated way. And I think depending on the location and the size of the properties, apartment buildings in their own right can become something of a hub for the neighbourhood. So it's not only the resident community in the building that we're thinking about now, we're thinking about what can we do within the property in those social spaces to encourage interaction with the surrounding neighbourhood and make that a real focus for community activity.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest developments in the hotel market here in London, is that a lot of lobbies have become community hubs where people will go and have a coffee or work for an hour, rather than being very exclusive. It wasn't that long ago that you were made to feel quite unwelcome in some hotel lobbies if you weren't a guest. But that's definitely been a big change.
Someone made me laugh recently, George, when they They were talking about co-living, co-working, co-dining, co-everything really, and reminded us all that this idea of this sort of shared co-space has been around for a long time already. It used to be called a pub, where you had all those activities downstairs and then there'd be rooms upstairs. You know, the idea's been around for a long time already. I think it's just gone through a few different interpretations, and I think we're moving into a different phase already.
Yeah, although I've never managed to get much work done in a pub. Dean, you wanted to come in on that one, I think.
Yeah, I think Paul makes a really valid point, and I think you echoed that, George. What's really interesting about serviced apartments versus hotels with those spaces is, typically in a hotel, you know, the public do sometimes come in and dine in the restaurants and use the facilities, or maybe they're members of the club. Whereas in serviced apartments, unless you're really staying in a serviced apartment, there's no real reason to come in, right? There's nothing to do. There's very few people maybe go visiting somebody. So I think having those spaces and designing those common spaces that could attract the community in, I think that's a really great idea and a really good way to get your product exposed to the public.
It only works. Yeah. It only works, of course, Dean, on properties with the space to do it. I mean,
exactly, 100%.
Hong Kong, for example, we could never do that. Our lobbies are 10 square meters.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. So that's, yeah, as you said, it's a luxury if you have it.
If I may, we obviously run hotels, but we also know that, you know, during this COVID time being tough times, hotels are not filling. So we have 4 properties. One is a quarantine property. One is running as a hotel, which say is 50–60%, which is okay. And the other 2 were basically at 0 because we hibernated them and renovated them. So what we did is we actually made a deal with a co-living company because we have great communal areas, and with this, they're called Dash Co-Living. They bring in people, basically we give them the apartments, and they have literally ramped up from 0 to 84% in one property already over a month and a half. Don't know where they find these people, but they are people who either are going out of their leases, going back to their home countries, have no job, have to hold out with the budget and the money that they have. And most importantly, we noticed, because they all go downstairs, they all cook downstairs. It's a great community, and it's called the Dash Community, which is with Ovolo in partnership, which is over a huge community of many, not necessarily buildings, but different apartments in the city in great destinations. We have given them one in Aberdeen, one in Central, and you know, the fridges downstairs are full. The baskets with all their food are all stacked up. They use this communal area to the max, be it in a WeWork type of scenario, or as a group to just have a beer or cook their meals. So actually, it works very well because, again, it saves them a buck, I suppose, and they can go down and join in, you know.
So these properties now have got a completely different guest demographic from when you were operating.
They do, for this period that we agreed to do this partnership, and you know, I think it can develop into more because it's a good concept. And you know, we have properties where you can open the windows from the old service apartment days, so that makes a difference as well. So we are in 2 properties, a bit of a hybrid at this stage.
Yeah, thanks, Marc. Let's talk a bit about technology and apartments, and that splits into 2 facets, really: the guest-facing technology and the operational technology. Caroline, what are you seeing becoming standard in terms of technology in an apartment that is guest-facing or end-user facing?
I'm seeing a lot of trends in smart homes. So, you know, like Google Home, Alexa. I think a lot of hotels are doing it. I think Ovolo, you guys have it in your guest rooms, and then, you know, just using that, like, for example, like smart curtains or like, you know, AC controls. So everything, like, you can just operate everything on your phone. So I'm seeing a lot of kind of like smart technology, but I think for hotel, like one of our hotel clients, I think they're a little bit wary. Maybe you guys can jump in on this. They're a little bit wary about installing too much smart technology, just so, you know, the demographic might be a wide range and they may not be comfortable with operating everything on an iPad or, you know, voice command and that kind of stuff. So yeah, so that's kind of the trend I've been seeing both in our hotel clients and in our residential clients.
I think what you're tactfully referring to was described to me once by a GM as the grandmother test. And any new technology that went into their rooms, he put himself in his grandmother's shoes and said, well, if she can't work it, then fair proportion of our guests won't be able to, so it's not going to be any good. And you know, I think that's a good thing to bear in mind, actually, because I have been in plenty of hotels where it's taken me 10 minutes to figure out how to work the lights, which is frustrating. And I think simplification should be what it's all about. Paul, what's your feeling about what you install in your apartments and what the guest expects these days?
Yeah, funny you should say that, George. Actually, our brand standards, whether they're hotels or apartments, we generally discourage a lot of the I suppose the smartphone controlled automated devices in the rooms, because we've all had an experience. We've checked into a hotel and then, like yourself, we can't find the button to turn off the lights on the control panel, and the user interface is always different depending on the platform or the brand you stay with. We try and keep it simple. We have marked light switches as a standard. There's a big master switch with master written on it, sort of thing. So keeping things simple, I think, is important for usability, functionality. I think, to Caroline's point, we'll see an increasing amount of internet connectivity, functionality that can be controlled from your smartphone, rooms that can be customized or personalized in some way from your smartphone. I think that's a trend that's not going away. I did see something very recently that caught my eye in terms of technological interface for a guest and an operator. And that came out of a group in China called Stay, S-T-E-Y. They're a small service department group. What caught my eye was that they built the app for the operation. Guests can send a request to have their room made up or order room service. But one interesting feature of their model was the operational, the business benefit. Because they have service departments with a lot of long stay guests, their app allows a tenant, if you need to travel, let's say for 5 days and hit the road, you can hit the button, you can let the hotel know you're going to be vacating your room for 5 nights. The hotel will then sell your apartment to another guest for the period that you're away. They get the extra revenue, you get a subsidy on your monthly rent, what they call a re-rent model. Both sides win. The owner has an extra occupant gaining revenue they wouldn't otherwise have had from an empty space. The tenant gets a subsidy on their rent. They make a little bit of money. I think it's a terrific model. So the technological inputs, I think, won't relate only to what's in a guest's hand, but I think there are a lot of advances being made on the back end and the operational interactions as well.
Mm-hmm. Marc, what are your thoughts on
in our case, Ovolo is a very, I could almost say, tech-driven or, you know, hip and happening group. We have one of our main themes is obviously music everywhere. We have, you know, for instance, with this new Dash co-living, we have an app whereby the guest has everything on his iPhone. I'm not talking about all the internal light and TV and all that, but all what goes with the community, be it from check-in, be it to a call center in the Philippines, be it to the perks, and what, you know, is all about for having the benefit of this community with Ovolo and Dash. At the same time, you know, we have one property has no phones in the room. Everything is over WhatsApp, and it's very efficient. We have obviously the Alexas, like Caroline mentioned. We have the Apple TVs. We have a lot of internet-driven, you know, systems, which is great. And again, these I guess is more on the millennial side, but that's very much what they're looking at all the time, right? They're black box and what counts, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Dean, let's talk a bit about the kind of operational technology. What is going into new developments and will be going into future developments from the building management side that can make buildings more efficient, more cost effective?
Obviously, I think the straight off the bat, that's the anything to do with the sustainability and the smart management of the buildings, as you say, George. The ESG model that everyone's talking about now. I think we cut anything to bring your carbon footprint down. Anything to monitor the efficient usage of power in the buildings. And you mentioned earlier, Singapore's been very proactive in certain ways we construct the buildings. I think it's interesting to see. I'd love to know more about it. I'm probably the one that would be the grandmother test on all this technology, right? Because it's actually quite funny. I'm just going back to the previous question. It wasn't that long ago that you would go to a hotel because it would have superior technology to what we had at home. Now that's completely changed, and what we have at home is far more superior to what we have in probably in any of our properties. I mean, I know Marc's property is very high tech and taking on a lot of that technology side. I think what we all have to do is be aware of the customer now coming with all their own devices. Of course, we all mentioned that on this panel just now, and enabling that technology to seamlessly integrate with whatever, whenever they move into the room, whether it's streaming to the TV or all those sort of things. I think that's I think is going to be really important. Not investing in technology ourselves because you just can't keep up. You can't ask an owner to continually fit new technology in every 2-3 years, and it's going much faster than even that.
Thanks, Dean. Paul, what are you seeing in terms of building management tech, both on the energy efficiency side and perhaps in other areas?
There's more and more of it. There's obviously some quick gains that can be made in terms of energy consumption, etc., resourcing with an automated building management system. We always encourage third-party owners to install one. Sometimes there's some pushback because I think the capital cost is always a bit of a challenge to overcome. The payback isn't immediate, of course, but certainly building management systems, automation systems that control the engineering systems are important. I think in the back office, we use a platform in a good number of our properties that helps automate task workflow between the various teams, housekeeping and engineering. So, for example, a guest might use the app to request a fix for a broken tap, or the TV's not functioning. So the engineering department directly receives that notification. They assign the room, they assign a time when the guest might be out or has asked for it to be fixed, and they go and address it. So I think the automation of what normally would have been very simple manual tasks is helping streamline operations.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Here in Hong Kong, if I may, we are very much clustering, obviously, between 4 properties. But just to say, for instance, on other sustainability in the latest hotel we just opened in Melbourne, the second one, which is last month in April, we for instance don't have plastic bottles or even glass bottles in the room. We have the tap, the water tap with a glass carafe, so you can basically pour your own water. And as a group, to again add to sustainability in another way, we are a group, and the only hotel group, I believe, that ventured in total vegetarian as a group since last October. So all our restaurants, all our food is vegetarian. And Dean, for your country, Australia, I thought the big meat eater country, great impact on the vegetarian. 25% are vegetarian. I didn't realize it's made a huge impact in Australia for us.
I'm vegetarian myself now, Marc.
Yeah, well, I am 80% too. Part-time vegetarian.
Marc, is that something that was driven by guest demand, or is that from the top down? Is that from the ownership?
Well, look, our owner is Indian, Hong Kong grown up, etc., and obviously vegetarian, right? But it was a trend of introducing health foods. We don't have Indian food as such. We have a nice mix of fusion or Indian or just healthy vegetarian, and it's very, very well liked. I mean, we're doing very well, and I think one of our restaurants here in Hong Kong just came down from over 100 TripAdvisor down to top 10 within a very short period, you know. And the latest one in Melbourne right now is called Lona Misa, and has taken off like a blitz, you know, immediately. It's now 3 weeks open. We have celebrity chefs, but they are, you know, very much vegetarian driven, and yeah. Actually, it says on their uniform or chef's T-shirt on the back, fueled by plants.
Okay, thanks, Marc. Dean, are you seeing, going back out to the sort of broader ESG and sustainability theme, are you seeing guests make decisions on where they stay according to perhaps the green or the ESG credentials of an accommodation provider?
I think corporations are including that in their RFP process to ensure that, you know, we're ticking the boxes. I haven't, you know, again, I haven't really seen a individual customer ask us about our sustainability program before booking. I think they probably do their research, and I think all of our websites probably indicate how much we're following benchmarks and best practices, etc., etc. But certainly seeing it more and more in the RFP process of corporate accounts. There's a big demand for us to ensure that we are ticking all the boxes.
Yeah. And on a related subject, Caroline, let's talk about wellness and well-being and the health of the guest. Are you seeing wellness measures incorporated into apartment design?
I do think people are more conscious on, you know, having exercise spaces and eating more healthy, as you guys were mentioning. So I do see people wanting to have, like, again, multi-use space so they can pull out their yoga mats and, you know, do an exercise routine, you know, especially now, like, you know, gyms are open and then gyms are closed, gyms are open and closed. So you can't even go out to exercise. So, you know, people are doing Zoom yoga classes or Zoom workouts. So, I mean, I think that's quite common, and people are doing that now. So, and yeah, so if you don't have like a gym space in the building, you know, they definitely they try to incorporate that into kind of, you know, instead of being enclosed in their apartment all the time now. Yeah.
Paul, obviously there are quite a few green building accreditation schemes, but now there are also, there's the WELL accreditation for healthy buildings and a couple of others. Is that something that you are conscious of as a group and you incorporate into your designs?
Yeah, it's something we've spoken about perhaps over the last 6 months when it became apparent that the pandemic was here to stay for a while. Everyone's focused on health and well-being at the moment. I mean, well-being is such a big topic in all sorts of different sectors at the moment. As it relates to hotels and apartments, I think a lot of well-being conversations are based around this idea of biophilic design. You hear the term used increasingly. I think it gets bandied around a little bit to describe buildings that have a lot of indoor plants in them, but it's much more than that, of course. I mean, fundamentally, biophilic design is about improving your connection to the external environment. And I think we all understand intuitively that a mix of great daylighting and ambient lighting and artificial lighting, good acoustic control, fresh air, these are all beneficial to our well-being. They help our mental acuity, they make us more productive at work. People intrinsically recognize the benefit of a connection to an outdoor environment. you've seen, I think we've all seen for a number of years, developers have recognized this as well. They are selling apartment buildings with sky gardens or rooftop gardens. Again, I think it has to go beyond just a green wall or some indoor plants, but fundamentally this movement towards recognizing the power of biophilic design, I'd like to think that that's going to have some impact on the hotel and the apartment sector over the next few years.
We are seeing a trend of like people looking for outdoor spaces. So it could be like having like a balcony or having a flat roof, you know, those seem to be like, and talking to like plant companies and, you know, greenery companies, and they said their sales had gone through the roof because people are just home gardening and they want outdoor space. So there's like this indoor outdoor space that, you know, Paul mentioned.
Yeah, Singapore actually was at the forefront of this 20 years ago. The government introduced a policy through the Urban Redevelopment Authority. They gave a concession to developers on GFA if that GFA was green space. So since then, you started to see buildings in Singapore, residential apartment buildings and others, incorporating green spaces that the developers could build essentially with no GFA penalty. So it helped them, it helped the consumer, it helped the buyer, and it greened the city. It was a terrific policy. And I think if something like this is to be successful, it really needs the backing at the policy level of municipal control.
Yeah, yeah. On a related subject, we've got a question in from James Barclay. Marc, I'll point this one in your direction. James says, what quality of life needs are you creating for your ideal customers that you didn't think about before?
Well, can I answer first on the quarantine hotel? I think we went through many experiences. You know, unfortunately, we have 21 days here in Hong Kong, and that's a ludicrous long time, you know. 14 days is already long, but after another 7 is very long. So we actually put plants in the room and gave them spray bottles, etc., to cultivate their own plants during that time. We also, of course, put yoga mats in all the rooms, and a lot of people, you know, in quarantine, they take up new experiences, be it, learning yoga or a language or doing a course or what have you, right? And other experiences to make, you know, let's say in communal areas more attractive. I mean, I'm sure it's nothing new, but we put laundry and washing machines in the gyms with the equipment, you know, so people actually kill 2 birds at the same time, besides being on their phone still as well, of course, right, and watching the news. So it's become very multitasking, and you have to cater to that.
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Marc. Let's talk about the crossover between hotel and residential design. Dean made an interesting point earlier that perhaps technology-wise, a lot of people's homes are more advanced than hospitality spaces. But traditionally, I think in terms of design, hospitality and particularly high-end hotels and apartments have set the bar, and people have aspired to match that in what they do at home. Joshua, maybe you can tell us about where you think residential design is leading and where hotel design is leading, and what the crossover might be.
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, on both residential and hotel side, the use of space and the efficient use of space is a huge factor, both from economical and environmental point of view. But one thing that I believe that when we are past through COVID-19, we will see that in both residential and also commercial spaces, you need to have a work from home or remote workspace. So I believe strongly, Marc can maybe disagree or agree with me, but there will be some kind of working desk in many hotel rooms, and all the discussions on residential side and design companies on residential side that we are having as a company are focused how we can build a workroom separately in the tight square meters, or then integrate the existing space with some multifunctional furniture or space separators that we will have a working space within limited areas or spaces.
Thanks, Joshua. Dean, what are you seeing in terms of crossover from the design of your hotel units and your apartments? Is one the other?
Well, I think it's a good question, because you know, again, what do we define a hotel and a service department now? Those lines are so thin, right? Most of us are providing the same level of hotel service in our service departments, and I think the desk is going to be the big feature. I think that's the big movement that we're going to see. Marc talked about it earlier. Joshua just mentioned it. Having the small desk in your bedroom. I think it's going to be the desk with a bed in it. Sorry, the study with a bed in it, rather than the bedroom with a desk in it. I think that's where we're going to see some interesting dynamics. And we're investing a little bit of R&D money into creating that desk, that smart desk. That, you know, that sort of was the feature in a room, that to make it not so much the feature, but to make it the feature now of the room.
And Paul, we're going to have to wrap up shortly. We've almost got to our hour. It's flown by again. But do you take cues for your properties from residential designs, or do you think hospitality design is leading the way?
I think it runs both ways, George. I think when it comes to visual design, I think there's been a lot of things through hotel design, particularly lifestyle hotels, the last 10 years, that have informed residential design. And you only have to look at the number of shows on Netflix, Tiny Home, Grand Designs, all of these sort of home decoration shows or shows focused on interior design. Hotel design, progressive design captures people's imaginations. They want to incorporate some of that in their own home environment. And I think on the flip side, some of the casualness, the informality, the multi-use that you find in residential design is finding its way back into the hotel sector as well. We've spoken at length today about hotel lobbies becoming much less stiff and formal and more multifunctional. So I think it runs both ways, but I'm personally kind of fascinated by the balance in visual design between the cues people take from their experience in a hotel and wanting to incorporate that back home. I mean, we travel for escapism, right? But it's always nice to try and incorporate that in our own lives. But the relaxation, the informality, the casualness of a home environment being brought back into a hotel space too.
Yeah, I did read about a couple of hotels. Sadly, I can't remember who it was, but everything that they had in their rooms, you could buy from the homewares supplier. So you literally could recreate the hotel room. You just stayed in at home if you wanted to.
I was just going to say, for guests, initially it started with, you know, they like the bathrobes, they like the linen, they like the amenities, and that's how they sort of said, I need that at home. And now actually some hotels offer that, right? Anyway, so it developed further up to the design. And I agree with Paul, you know, the practicalities of home, you want them also in a residence or in a hotel room as much as you can. You don't want to have that sterile, you know, use of a normal hotel room. You want it to be functional.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks everyone. That was a great discussion. I'm just going to share the results of the poll quickly before we wrap up. So question 1 in the poll was, which would you prioritize, on property amenities or the local area? So on property was gym, kitchen, co-working space. Local area was coffee shops, restaurants, retail, etc. And that was quite close. 52% prioritized the local area, over 48%. Question 2, what's the most important amenity to you? And space for remote working came out top with 34%, followed by design appeal, fully furnished, more than one bedroom, other got 2%, environmentally friendly didn't get a single vote, surprisingly, but I think that will probably change in the future. Thanks everybody for joining us today. I think it's been a great discussion. The next Rising Up session is tomorrow, and that's about a work from anywhere future, trends driven by working from anywhere in APAC, and that's going to be hosted by my colleague Eloise. The link to register for that session, excuse me, is in the chat now. Also, the LinkedIn profiles of all our panelists are in the chat, so if you'd like to carry on the conversation with them, then please do make contact. A quick reminder that the Service Department Awards are taking place in London on the 24th of June in person. We can't wait to see loads of you there. It's going to be the first time that we've gathered together as an industry since last year, so that's going to be fantastic. Again, the link is in the chat for more information. So thanks for watching today. Thanks to AltoVita for sponsoring, and special thanks to Dean, Caroline, Marc, Joshua and Paul for their input today. Thanks very much, everyone, and have a good day.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.